Cheers, guys. Epyx911, welcome to
Gaming Friday. Well, winner, airline dinner. Your old pal Exidy has been working at the airport on the project there the last couple of weeks, and let me tell you, getting airline security clearance is a massive pain in the butt. But that's all over with now, and it is time for some gaming. Res Infinite time. On the PC, there is absolutely nothing like it. And if you guys do not have this yet, and you've got a VR headset, you've got to get it. It's the most amazing thing you've ever seen, especially in the new Mode X. It is just fantastic. But that's my gaming for Gaming Friday. In the meantime, it's time to let you back to my old pal Epyx911 because it is time for VR news.
the Gaming Friday, August 25th, 2017 edition of VR News. Before we jump into the news, guys, just quickly want to talk about something that was brought up regarding yesterday's show, and that's the question of speculation and rumors. No, this site doesn't tend to report a lot of that at all. Probably a handful. It happens from time to time, but here's kind of my criteria. So a story, that of HTC possibly selling Vive, well, there were three possibilities, was told on multiple source sites yesterday. Few of those sites not really being clear on facts versus rumor and speculation. I kind of see that almost as a duty, being an aggregate news provider, of ensuring that people who read that story know that at this point in time it is just rumor and speculation. Thus the tagline in caps with a question mark, and me saying at several points within the video itself, including right up front, that this is purely speculation and rumor. First story, let's just say up front, speculation. There's no proof of this. This is based on rumors at this point only. It's good to have a source, in my opinion, that's clear on that right from the outset. So if somebody does come to that as a secondary source for that story, they're going to be able to see that at this point in time, there are no facts that have been made public to support the story. The story, in a sense, is that there's a rumor and speculation about something really big happening. And that's generally the only time I'm going to get into that. With that said, guys, let's jump into the news, starting with this first story. Virtual reality arcades starting to pop up all over the place, and not the smaller variety, but the bigger, more themed variety. IMAX announcing today that they have struck a new partnership with Canadian theater chain Cineplex to bring an IMAX VR center to the Scotiabank Theatre in Toronto. And that's part of a deal that's going to see IMAX also install auditoriums at another cinema in Toronto, including one in Regina, which is in the province of Saskatchewan. Now, I had hoped, obviously, while I was living in Vancouver, that it was going to appear at a Cineplex there. While I was there, didn't turn out to be the case. That makes sense in hindsight because Toronto, obviously a bigger city, the biggest in Canada. Location's going to be Richmond Street West, that's near the theater district in the Scotiabank Theatre. To make room, the location's going to move their existing box office to the second floor. And this next story, also dealing with virtual reality arcades, this time the Bandai Namco VR Zone variety. Well, that company made good on its promise that we were going to see more of these outside of Asia. Well, we have one. The first of these, London's O2, is going to host a VR Zone. 2 games at the moment, a far cry from the 12 at the Shinjuku location, but it's a start. You can either play Horror Real Experience Room Escape Ward or Argyle Shift. It's basically $10 US each is what it amounts to when you do the conversion. Both games using Vives as well as various immersion accessories. Hospital Escape Terror puts you in the role of a wheelchair-bound patient navigating the hospital, its corridors, and basically avoiding psychotic denizens as you try to escape. Second game is called Argyle Shift. That one is at the other end of the facility there, puts you in a flight chair as you take control of a flying experimental mech suit and get dropped in the middle of a frantic battle. Both games using the VR Zone formula of competitive gameplay. in the form of competitive scoring. So you and the person beside you essentially in a battle. Now, if it's a stranger, who cares? But if it's one of your friends, you know what? That might prompt you to put some more time into the game. Next up, always been a sucker for Wipeout-inspired games. Only being an older geek gamer, I prefer to think of them as Stun Runner-inspired games. Not sure if anybody remembers this 1989 Atari arcade game. Well, that was the one that got me into this type of game, and absolutely a classic. But regardless of what you call it, if you're into that type of game, developer Tameka Games is bringing Radial-G to the PlayStation VR as well as to the Google Daydream. This is a year after it appeared on the Rift and the Vive. European Union is going to get the game September 12th digitally, or if you wait till the 15th of September, you can purchase it as a boxed edition. It's going to be £30. Just a quick note regarding the Daydream version, it's going to be a single-player spin-off that sees you racing against 4 AI opponents, but they're keeping all 9 of the tracks. And then this next story, Form, a VR puzzle game. It was originally launched in June for the Vive via Steam VR. Well, Vancouver-based developer Charm Games, the studio behind the game, now announcing that it's available for Oculus Rift via Steam VR and, of course, the Oculus Store. If you purchase the game within the next week, you're going to get it discounted, yours for $12 US. After the first week, it's going to go back up to $15 US. Charm Games also added in that announcement that they are going to be working, or rather are working, on additional VR games in the pipeline. This next story, a medical VR story. Doctor and author Dr. Raphael Olea, conducting the first VR basic life support course, spent 6 months of development time that led up to a case study that happened this last April. And it involved a bunch of expertise, clinical medicine, medical education, psychology of learning and instruction, and of course, VR software development. A couple of administrative people were the first. There was a group of 5, couple of admin people, a nurse, and 2 GP doctors went through the course, and then they were asked questions about the experience afterwards. Now, while it was being developed, it was pretty quickly apparent that they were also going to have to make this fun. Making it fun really added to the retention of people practicing on this. It's designed to be used alone or alongside more traditional courses. In the feedback section, you can see there's a few forms here. The ratings on a scale of 1 to 10. The only thing I was curious about, and I've reached out for an answer on this, is that the survey results all seem to indicate the participants were pleased with the technology. They felt it benefited them, yet strangely, one of the 5 saying they would not recommend the technology to others. But there was no reason given in the article. Of course, I'm curious what that reason may be, so I reached out for an answer. Haven't gotten a response yet, but when I do, I'll share that. Whether you support a specific type of virtual reality locomotion, and let's be real, there are people on both sides. There's a group that likes the teleportation style of locomotion, and there's a side that prefers smooth. For a lot of people, the teleportation being part of the gameplay mechanics is one thing, but it's generally accepted by most of us that teleportation is it's a reliable way for most people to reduce VR motion sickness. And the status quo has really kind of include 2 forms, teleportation and then throw in some kind of smooth locomotion option. Well, Crytek and Oculus have been releasing some collaborative videos on that topic and talking about some interesting new forms of VR locomotion.
We call it the chicken acceleration, which allows the player to activate his avatar movement by moving head forward, and then the movement is continuous until you move your head backwards to stop. This acceleration keeps the player hands and his HMD free to do anything while moving, and only needs to be in certain position to stop or start the motion once when performing the action.
There are other forms of locomotion discussed in other videos. One, for example, charge float jump. You basically hold down a jump button for as long as you want, charging up the time, and then basically increasing your jump possibility. They recommend this for hang gliding or wingsuit type games. Another is HMD acceleration, works pretty much like the chicken acceleration, but in all directions with your HMD. Then they've got one called world rotation, and that one basically utilizes your touch controllers, pulling a trigger and then moving the controller left or right to rotate the world. And they mention using that in conjunction with something like the jump or one of the other ones for FPS games, for example. So it's a great way of kind of getting different types of VR locomotion out there to the developer community. Well, until then, like I said, I think most of us have just come to accept the status quo, which is have at minimum two types, a smooth and a teleportation, at least until the technology gets to a point where you can do away with that, because most people will no longer get VR motion sickness. And really, the only exception I can see for that is a game where the teleportation mechanic is so integral to the gameplay that omitting it would fundamentally change the game, or having a smooth locomotion option alongside that would do the same. That's really the only time I can see an exception to the status quo, or the technology getting to the point where it addresses that. Well, guys, that is it for the Gaming Friday VR news. Have a kick-arse weekend, guys, and as always, cheers.